For centuries, mainstream science has dismissed the legendary city of Atlantis as nothing more than a philosophical fairy tale. But what if the greatest lost civilization in human history wasn't buried under the ocean, but hiding in plain sight, deep within the Mauritanian Sahara? This is the Richat Structure, a massive anomaly known as the Eye of the Sahara. It remained hidden in its full concentric glory until the early Gemini space missions photographed it from orbit. From above, it matches Plato's exact dimensions for the lost city, down to the decimal. But before we can treat this myth as reality, we must examine what modern geologists say this structure actually is. To the established earth sciences, the Eye of the Sahara is not an ancient man-made ruin. Geologists universally classify it as a deeply eroded, symmetrical geological dome. Over 100 million years ago, volcanic magma pushed up from deep within the Earth, creating a massive dome in the crust without ever erupting. Over countless millennia, relentless wind and water erosion sliced the top off this dome, exposing the flat, concentric rings of varied rock layers we see today. It is considered a masterpiece of natural forces, an incredible geological accident. But what happens when we lay Plato's ancient texts directly over this natural formation? Most historians treat Plato's famous dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, as political allegories, cautionary tales of hubris and divine punishment. But what if we read them differently? What if we approach these texts not as a fictional fairy tale, but as a precise geographic and architectural blueprint? These ancient Greek manuscripts are the primary historical sources that describe the dimensions, layout, and ultimate destruction of Atlantis. Rather than hunting for vague similarities, we can use Plato's exact words to conduct a forensic cross-examination. And the best place to start is with the most specific measurement he provided: the exact size of the city. Plato wrote that the central city of Atlantis was a marvel of engineering, measuring precisely 127 stadia in diameter. The stadium was an ancient Greek unit of length. When we convert 127 stadia into modern measurements, it translates to approximately 23.5 kilometers. Now, let's look at the topography of the Richat structure. When we measure the diameter of its prominent inner rings, the distance across is staggering. The span of those central concentric circles clocks in at exactly 23.5 kilometers. The mathematical correlation is flawless. Finding a geological anomaly with the exact diameter of a mythical city is staggering. But the physical shape is an equally compelling detail. According to the Critias dialogue, the sea god Poseidon carved the city into alternating rings of sea and land to protect the central island. Plato was incredibly specific about this layout. He described 2 zones of land and 3 zones of water, forming a perfect concentric bullseye. Look closely at the alternating ridges and valleys of the eye. The hard quartzite ridges form raised walls, while the softer rock valleys form wide depressions. If this basin were filled with water, those depressions would become perfect circular canals, mirroring Plato's exact description of 3 rings of water and 2 of land. Could natural geological rings have inspired the legend of the city built in concentric circles? A matching shape and size is just the beginning of the geographical coincidences. The visual and dimensional alignment between the Richat structure and Plato's Atlantis is difficult to ignore. The mathematical correlation between the 127 stadia and the Richat's inner rings establishes a solid baseline for our forensic comparison. We are left with a profound question. Is this precise dimensional alignment merely a cosmic coincidence of erosion? Or is it the foundation of a real, forgotten historical memory? But size and shape alone cannot prove the existence of an empire. To build a sprawling, advanced civilization, you need materials. And Plato was remarkably specific about the colors of the stones used in Atlantis. We know the dimensions line up perfectly, but shape alone is just a coincidence without the raw materials to back it up. Plato's account didn't just give us a vague outline of a sunken city. He provided a highly specific, multicolored architectural blueprint. According to the ancient texts, the Atlanteans quarried stones directly from the circular rings of their island to construct their grand defensive walls and temples. Looking closely past the sprawling satellite imagery to examine the actual bedrock of the Mauritanian desert forces us to ask a startling question. Do the natural geological colors of this barren wasteland genuinely match the exact building materials described thousands of years ago in ancient Greece? Plato explicitly documented that the city was built using a distinct combination of three rock colors: red, white, and black. If you walk the concentric rings of the Richat Structure today, you won't just find ordinary desert sand. You will find a landscape dominated by three incredibly specific types of exposed bedrock. The outer rings are composed of deep red sandstone and pale white quartzite, glittering under the harsh African sun. Scattered throughout the site, particularly near the center, are intrusions of dark volcanic basalt, the black stone. Red, white, and black. It is a perfect forensic match to Plato's architectural inventory. But a city of that magnitude needs more than just stone walls. It requires a massive, reliable water supply. Plato claimed that Poseidon himself provided the central island of Atlantis with two natural springs, one of cold water and one of hot. Finding evidence of flowing springs in the hyper-arid Sahara seems impossible, yet modern geological surveys tell a completely different story. Core samples and geological mapping of the Richat Dome have confirmed extensive ancient hydrothermal activity right at the center of the structure. Fissures in the rock once pushed geothermally heated water to the surface, alongside cooler freshwater aquifers. With the distinct building stones and the thermal springs definitively accounted for within the geological record, we have to zoom out. Plato's blueprint didn't stop at the city limits. He also described the wider regional geography surrounding the Atlantean capital. He wrote that the city was situated on a level plain but was heavily sheltered by towering, spectacular mountains to the north. These northern peaks supposedly protected the inhabitants from freezing, harsh northern winds, creating a localized, thriving microclimate. When we pull up modern topographical data and satellite elevation maps of Mauritania, another striking alignment immediately leaps off the screen. Directly to the north of the Richat Structure lies a massive, elevated mountainous ridge. This towering geological shield completely cuts off the northern horizon, precisely where the ancient texts dictated it should be. We now have an exact match for the structural dimensions, the specific tricolored stones, the central hydrothermal springs, and the protective northern mountains. The forensic evidence is staggering, stacking coincidence upon coincidence until the word coincidence loses all meaning. But despite these incredible tangible alignments, we are forced to confront one massive glaring problem. Atlantis was the crown jewel of an oceanic empire, a thriving maritime civilization surrounded by the sea. The Richat Structure is stranded hundreds of miles inland, buried under the suffocating arid sands of the modern Sahara Desert. If this truly was an island city, how on earth did the waters of the Atlantic Ocean ever reach this far into West Africa? Hit subscribe and join us as we solve the mystery of the missing ocean by traveling back in time through the paleoclimate record. The most glaring objection to the Eye of the Sahara being Atlantis is blindingly obvious. Atlantis was supposed to be a maritime empire, an island civilization completely surrounded by the sea. Today, the Richat sits hundreds of miles inland, baked by the relentless sun and drowning in an endless ocean of dry sand. And how could a massive naval fleet possibly navigate a bone-dry wasteland? To answer that, we have to look past the modern topography and dig directly into the paleoclimate record. Mainstream paleoclimatologists do not rely on myths. They use sediment cores and fossil records to reconstruct exactly what the Earth looked like thousands of years ago. And what they found in North Africa rewrites everything. The geological record paints a completely different picture of Mauritania during the proposed timeline of Atlantis. This era is known to science as the African Humid Period. Around 11,000 years ago, a slight wobble in the Earth's orbit fundamentally altered the planet's climate systems. This orbital shift pulled the African monsoon rains far to the north, drenching the entire region in relentless, life-giving water. For thousands of years, the environment surrounding the Richat Structure was completely unrecognizable from the arid wasteland we see today. The ancient Sahara was a vibrant, lush paradise. Deep, sprawling lakes covered the low-lying basins, and massive river systems carved their way through the bedrock. Fossil records prove that hippopotamuses, crocodiles, and massive schools of fish thrived in these waters, surrounded by dense, green vegetation. This was not just a habitable zone. It was a highly connected, navigable water world that could easily support a thriving, oceanic maritime culture. The idea of ships sailing through what is now the deep Sahara is not a fantasy. It is a geological certainty backed by hard science. But Plato didn't just mention general waterways. Plato's architectural blueprint for Atlantis was incredibly specific. He stated that the concentric rings of the city were connected by a grand water channel. According to his ancient texts, this massive canal allowed ships to pass directly from the ocean into the heart of the city's rings. Crucially, Plato gave a precise geographical constraint for this engineering marvel. He explicitly wrote that this channel opened to the sea to the south. If the Richat Structure is the true location of Atlantis, the natural geology must support the existence of a southern channel leading toward the ocean. When we zoom out and look at modern satellite maps of Mauritania, the scars of ancient water become undeniably clear. Stretching directly south and west from the Richat Structure, massive, sweeping landforms gouge the earth, tracing a violent path toward the Atlantic Ocean. These are not wind-blown sand dunes. They are deep, wide channels etched into the bedrock by severe historical water erosion. The topography perfectly matches the path a catastrophic volume of water would take, either draining from an inland sea or surging inland from the coast. The sweeping tracks south of the Richat provide the exact geographical footprint required by Plato's southern channel. The climate data and the visible waterways align perfectly. The African Humid Period and the massive erosion scars answer the biggest geographical critique of the Saharan Atlantis theory. We now know that an aquatic empire could have absolutely thrived in this exact location. But thriving empires don't just vanish without a trace. If the environment was lush, connected, and deeply supportive of life, what could have triggered such a catastrophic collapse, wiping the city off the map so completely? To understand how Atlantis disappeared, we can't just look at the geography. we must look at the exact date Plato gave for its violent, sudden destruction. Plato's account wasn't just a geographical map detailing rings of water and land. It came with a highly specific mathematical expiration date. According to the ancient texts, the revered Greek statesman Solon traveled to Egypt around the year 600 BC. There, high priests at the Temple of Sais revealed a staggering timeline. They claimed the mighty empire of Atlantis fell exactly 9,000 years before their conversation. Do the math on those ancient numbers, and it places the catastrophic destruction of Atlantis approximately 11,600 years ago. For decades, historians dismissed this precise number as a mythological exaggeration. But modern paleoclimatology suggests otherwise. When scientists drill deep into the glacial ice of Greenland, they extract frozen time capsules of Earth's ancient atmosphere. These ice cores provide a flawless, year-by-year chemical record of global temperatures and atmospheric shifts. And when we look at the data from exactly 11,600 years ago, it reveals a massive, unprecedented anomaly in the Earth's climate. This precise date marks the exact end of the Younger Dryas, a violent, erratic climate period where the planet snapped out of a deep freeze. The end of the Younger Dryas was not a gentle, gradual climatic shift. It was a terrifying period of profound global chaos. As global temperatures suddenly spiked, the colossal ice sheets covering North America and Northern Europe began to rapidly collapse. Billions of gallons of trapped fresh water violently emptied into the oceans in a verified geological event known as Meltwater Pulse 1b. During this exact window, 11,600 years ago, global sea levels didn't just slowly rise. They surged upward with terrifying speed. Ancient coastlines were obliterated overnight. Entire land masses that had existed for millennia vanished beneath the waves in a matter of decades. This sudden influx of glacial meltwater would have resulted in catastrophic coastal flooding, completely rewriting the map of human civilization. Now, listen to Plato's exact description of the apocalyptic end of Atlantis. He wrote of portentous earthquakes and floods, stating that in one day and one fatal night, the magnificent island was swallowed by the sea. It was not a slow decline of an empire. It was a rapid, violent extermination of an entire culture. Could an ancient human culture have witnessed the catastrophic sea level rises of the Younger Dryas, passing that trauma down as a myth? When we look back at the Richat Structure in Mauritania, the physical evidence of sweeping water forces makes horrific sense. Geological surveys of West Africa reveal a vast desert landscape scarred by immense hydraulic trauma. Just south of the eye of the Sahara, there are wide, sweeping erosion channels that cut deeply across the African bedrock. These massive geological striations are entirely consistent with an oceanic surge, a wall of seawater pushed violently inland by extreme climate chaos. As that unimaginable volume of water retracted back toward the Atlantic, it would have scraped the land bare, washing directly over the Richat Structure. The timeline of this global destruction is a flawless match for Plato's ancient date. But this brings us to the ultimate reckoning of this theory. The concentric rings match Plato's exact measurements. The surrounding mountains and southern plains align perfectly with his geographical coordinates. Even the highly specific 11,600-year timeline correlates precisely with the violent end of the Younger Dryas climate shift. This perfect storm of geological and historical alignment remains one of the most compelling anomalies in the entire Atlantis debate. But if the geography, geology, and timeline match so perfectly, where is the physical evidence of the people who lived there? Where is the debris of an empire? Because to definitively prove a legendary lost city actually existed, you need more than just matching rocks and dates. You need artifacts. We have aligned the dimensions, mapped the geology, and synchronized the timeline. But to prove that a legendary empire once stood in the Mauritanian desert, we have to confront the physical dirt. Despite the staggering geographical coincidences, we have to ask what mainstream archaeologists have actually found when they put shovels into the sands of the Richat Structure. Extensive archaeological surveys have been conducted across this remote stretch of the Sahara over the past few decades. And the findings do indeed tell a story of ancient human habitation within the rings of the eye. But they do not tell the story of a sprawling, advanced maritime empire. Plato described a civilization dripping in wealth, with immense circular walls coated in brass, tin, and the legendary gleaming metal known as orichalcum. If an advanced ancient superpower thrived here, there should be scattered remnants of metallurgy, the foundations of grand palaces, or the broken husks of advanced weaponry buried in the sediment. Yet, mainstream archaeology notes a complete and total absence of these materials. Not a single ounce of smelted bronze, no urban foundations, and no advanced metallic artifacts have ever been unearthed at the center of the Richat Structure. Instead of the glittering remnants of Poseidon's temple, researchers have uncovered something much older and much simpler. The artifacts actually recovered from the Eye of the Sahara are exclusively Paleolithic and Neolithic stone tools. Archaeologists have found thousands of hand axes, flint arrowheads, and rudimentary scrapers scattered across the concentric rings. These discoveries perfectly align with the African Humid Period, proving that when the Sahara was a lush, green savanna, hunter-gatherers and early pastoral societies thrived right here in the structure. But these finds severely contradict the timeline of a highly advanced, engineering-focused civilization. The stark reality of simple stone tools forces us to ask a difficult, polarizing question. How do we reconcile this complete absence of complex archaeological proof with the overwhelming, almost impossible geographic evidence? We are left weighing two competing extremes. The first possibility is the simplest. The city never existed here. The Richat Structure is merely a spectacular geological fluke that happens to perfectly mirror a philosopher's imagination. The second possibility is far more terrifying. Could the cataclysmic flooding of the Younger Dryas have been so incredibly violent that it literally scoured the site down to the bedrock? Severe water erosion from a massive oceanic inundation or rapid glacial melt could certainly decimate an ancient settlement. But completely eradicating every single trace of advanced metallurgy, leaving only scattered stone tools behind, severely stretches the limits of archaeological probability. And yet, we cannot simply ignore the staggering list of anomalies that brought us to the desert in the first place. We are looking at a massive geological formation measuring exactly 127 stadia in diameter, flawlessly matching Plato's precise architectural blueprint. We have the exact presence of red, white, and black stones sitting just south of sheltering northern mountains, with a clear channel leading out toward the ancient sea. And, tying it all together, is a destruction timeline of 11,600 years ago, which perfectly aligns with the most violent climate upheaval in human history. The research landscape remains fiercely polarized between these stunning geographic parallels and the strict, unforgiving requirements of physical proof. Ultimately, the Eye of the Sahara leaves us with a profound and haunting mystery. We may never know for certain if the Richat structure was the literal, physical Atlantis, or if it was the ancient inspiration for Plato's great allegory passed down through Egyptian priests. It might just be the most brilliant, perfectly timed geological illusion ever crafted by nature. But whether it holds the ghosts of a lost empire, or just the echoes of the ancient earth, the Eye of the Sahara continues to challenge our understanding of history, and it demands our awe.